Good. All right, now I'll call the meeting to order. We have met compliance with official notifications. Roll call, please.
Steve Stubak.
Here.
Laura Gapsky.
Here.
Brooke Taylor.
Here.
Mike Meyer.
Here.
Steve Olson.
Here.
I'm here. President Albrecht.
Here. Just a reminder that this meeting is a meeting of the Board of Education held in public for the purpose of conducting the school district's business and is not to be considered a public community meeting. There is a time for comments or questions by the members of the public during the meeting, as indicated on the agenda. Members of the public wishing to address the board on any of the topics included on tonight's agenda may do so by completing a public comment sign-up sheet up here with Ann. And I believe I've got that right here. Comments should be focused on the items being considered by the board and should be restricted to no more than 3 minutes in length. With that, we will move into the report of the superintendent.
Okay, I have a handful of informational items tonight. The first informational item is a presentation from Karen Daniel Hamburg, Cooperative Strategies. So I want to make sure she can hear us. Okay, Karen, can you hear us?
I can hear you.
Great, we can hear you as well. I'll just give a little bit of background and then I'll pass it to you. Okay, Karen? About a year ago, our district participated in a capacity study. And most recently, our capacity study has been updated with student enrollment information that reflects the 22-23 school year. And so you may remember we worked with Matt initially. He was our point of contact for Cooperative Strategies. He is no longer with Cooperative Strategies, and Karen is now working in Matt's role. So welcome, Karen. Thanks for joining us. I'm going to pass it to you. I know you have a presentation that you'll share, and then after the presentation, the board can ask any questions that they may have, okay?
That sounds great.
All right.
Let me share my screen here. Okay, can you see my screen?
You might need to click on that bottom button, I think, Ann. Yes, we can.
Okay, great. Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm happy to be here. Like she mentioned, my name is Karen Daniel Hamburg with Cooperative Strategies, and I'm just going to be taking you through the results of our capacity study tonight. There we go. So we started this process by collecting data. We held an initial kickoff meeting where we discussed buildings, special programs such as pre-K and special education, class sizes, and then scheduled our building tours. We also collected floor plans to verify room use and square footage of each space at this time. When we conducted our building tours, we started off each tour with an interview with the principal to better understand the ins and outs of each facility. We then went through every space in the building to confirm room use and design. After this, we developed capacities for each building using the data that we gathered. This then went into a report, the results of which I'm going to share with you this evening. So before we get into the numbers, I just want to go over a couple of things with you. We did calculate two different capacities for each building. So the first one is a program capacity, which is the capacity of the building based on its current use of each space, regardless of what it was originally designed for. So any classroom being used for an admin space or a resource room, or just any pull-out space was not given a capacity in this case. We then calculated a design capacity, which considered the original intended use of each space. In this case, any classroom designed as a classroom would be given capacity regardless of its current use. So if we have a classroom that was designed as a classroom but currently being used as a resource room, in the design capacity, it would receive capacity. In the program capacity, it would not. The exception to this would be at the elementary school level where art and music spaces are not given capacity. Same with any other special spaces. As you know, middle and high school do have a different scheduling model than the elementary schools. At the secondary level, students switch classrooms throughout the day, but most spaces are only used 6 out of 7 periods of the day due to those planning periods. So in order to account for this time that the classrooms are not in use, a scheduling factor of 85.7%, or 6 divided by 7, was applied to the middle and high school capacities. All right. So this slide details the elementary capacities as well as this year's enrollment and overall utilization. Just a note, the utilization is just the enrollment divided by the capacity. The chart on the left, on the far left, details the capacities applied to each classroom type at the elementary level. So you can see we have different class sizes for K through 3rd, 4th, and 5th, as well as a self-contained special education. The top table on this slide illustrates the program capacity, which factors in the programs that currently exist in each building. And the bottom table illustrates the design capacities, which show the capacity of the building as it was designed. Overall, at the elementary level, the utilizations are pretty low. You're looking at a program capacity of 71.7% overall at the elementary level. A couple of notes about elementary schools. The ideal utilization range for elementaries is 85 to 100%. Then that's when those buildings are functioning optimally. The program capacity is a combined 71.1%, meaning there's 736 seats available. And then if we look at the design capacity, we're looking at a combined 64.1% utilization of those buildings with over 1,000 seats available. And then looking at the middle school and high school, again, just a reminder that we did factor in the scheduling factor, the 85.7% or 87.5%, I believe, into these. So you can see on the top, we have our program capacity. This is detailing the programs that are in these buildings, and then the design capacity, which is how the building was designed. At the 6th through 12th level, we are looking at class sizes of 25 students per classroom. PE is a little bit different. That size doubles, and then again, self-contained special education, just like at the elementary level, is 10 students per classroom. And the ideal range for middle schools and high schools in terms of utilization is 80 to 90%. And that is all I have. Are there any questions?
Karen, can you go back to the summary of the elementary schools?
Absolutely.
And maybe the slide after that. That one right there. So in general, my understanding is, like you said on here, the ideal utilization range is between 85 and 100, and that we're currently using our buildings at about 71% capacity if we're thinking about the program design, right?
That is correct, yes.
A couple other things, just points of information for the board. One is we're seeing our high school enrollment is higher than it was about 5 years ago due to the large 9th grade class that we have there. The rest of the district is seeing a slow decline in elementary enrollment. So historically, for the last 5 years, we're seeing less students at the elementary and at the middle school level. Anticipate in about 4 years, we'll see the high school will reflect that same pattern given the large class that will graduate from the current 9th grade class. Do you guys have questions?
Can we get a copy of that?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yes. A hard copy to all aboard? Yep. Mm-hmm. Karen, a question that has come up in the past is two things. One, is there an opportunity to redo boundaries? And would it be a recommendation that we consider reboundaries of our elementary schools, considering our capacity is so inconsistent?
Most definitely.
That's a
if
comment.
you look, yes. Look, if you look at Great Lakes Elementary School, they are the highest utilized at 90%. Then you have Four Corners, which is actually, those two are probably your best utilized schools right now, although they are the highest. So all that to say, you probably could do without one of your elementary schools. But regardless, in order to balance some of these utilizations, boundaries are a perfectly good method to do that.
Are there other recommendations that you do when district's in this situation?
I would say that the biggest recommendations I could give to you, if you aren't seeing explosive growth in your district, it would probably be more efficient to operate with, let's see, 5 instead of 6 elementary schools. And then in terms of efficiency, certainly boundaries will help better utilize your schools and kind of balance things out.
So considering the summary slide that you shared after this slide that says we have over 700 available, possible to reduce the number of schools by 1 at the elementary level, Karen?
Most definitely. Certainly not your biggest school. That would kind of put you in a bind if you closed Northern Lights. That would not be okay. But one of your smaller elementary schools, you could certainly get rid of. Two would be tough, just because you'd lose some of that flexibility. But I think certainly one. You have 700 seats right now to spare.
Karen, could I ask a question?
Yes, please.
I'm curious about what things change in communities that would increase or decrease enrollment. And that might be obvious, but what have you seen? If we're looking out, not just 2 years, but 4 years, 6 years, 10 years.
A lot of times, development will play a big role in that, like housing development. It won't come all at once. Most of the time, we usually see if a development comes online, it takes it a couple years to start really yielding a significant amount of students. So if a development comes online, you do have a little bit of time to prepare for that. Something else I've seen, I mean, COVID definitely decreased across the nation. So that's something to kind of keep in mind too, big pandemics, uncertainty with that. I don't know if you have any large like companies coming to your area, but I've seen that have a pretty big draw a couple years out as well. Again, these are all things that you would have time to plan for.
Just a couple reminders. We did do a demographic study about 3 years, right before COVID. We did a demographic study to look at this population, 10-year population plan. And at that time, it showed a very slight gradual decline of student enrollment over 10 years. Then COVID happened. And so then we saw a drop in about 200 students, and we're gradually making up that loss in the last couple of years. But that original 10-year study takes into consideration birth rates, city development, and census data. So we did do that. The other thing that I think it's important to note, we have had a couple housing complexes go up in our area. When we've talked to the city about, do we anticipate student enrollment changes in, like, for example, the one that's being built next to Great Lakes, typically those aren't families moving into that. And we have not seen our schools impacted by significant enrollment due to those, at least those two existing complexes that have been added recently.
Karen, does your the cooperative strategies, do they give recommendations on how a district would make that decision of which school, or any information as far as guidance on that issue?
We can certainly work with you to come to that. I wouldn't really be comfortable in this setting going through that without knowing where your populations are. Like, maybe there's one school that it makes more sense than others if you're looking into that. I would definitely want to look at where the populations are and the trends in specific populations or specific areas before we make a decision on that, on which building.
So yeah, that's helpful. You were saying it would be like density of population is something that a district would look at. And what else were you saying are things that you consider when a district is looking at that?
Density of populations, as well as the changes in populations. If we have a population that's just decreasing in students, that has been over time. If it's looking at like it's going to continue to do so, do we really need a school in that area? It's also important to consider transportation too. If we take a building offline where a ton of kids live close to it, then it is going to have an impact on transportation if those kids are having to be transported across the district. So I think the most important thing to look at is likely where those students are living now.
I guess I have a recommendation for the board, and I would like some direction from the board. One next step could be we put together a community committee of stakeholders that represent all of our elementary schools to look at this information, as well as all the information that we've talked about recently regarding our budget forecast, our facility needs, and have that committee do some learning and making recommendation to the board. I think we need to first know what the plan would be for these 6 elementary schools. And then my recommendation would be next fall, we ask Cooperative Strategies to help us look at boundaries, and again, use a committee of community stakeholders that would work with Cooperative Strategies to help make some recommendations to the board around what boundaries could look like.
I was gonna ask for what like a time frame. What do they need
Right.
for a time frame to do something like
When
that?
I've talked to Matt in the past, Karen, Matt has said it takes a few months to be able to get some parameters from the board, to be able to do some community feedback sessions and then present those results to the board. He's kind of said about a 2 to 3 month timeline for conversations around boundaries. Is that still consistent with your thoughts and recommendations?
Absolutely. If you're looking to have an answer by the end of the year, like the end of 2023, then we'd probably want to get started this fall, maybe in August, starting to gather that background data and things like that. But we would need a decision to this before then.
And I just want to remind the board that one of the reasons we moved forward with the capacity study was the concerns really since I've been here for the last 5 years from some of our elementary schools that are at or near capacity, the struggle to find space in some of those schools. While we have, for example, Cooper, that's almost at only about 50% capacity. It's one of our brand new buildings that's not being utilized. We have many classrooms that are not being utilized in that space right now. And so there has been a desire across the district to really look at the capacity of each of our buildings and potentially redo boundaries. So that certainly has been something I've heard for the last 5 years. And that's one of the reasons that prompted this study.
I'd be in complete support of community stakeholder committee and
Putting together,
absolutely.
make a recommendation based on this as to what next steps would be for our school district regarding the status of our 6 elementary schools.
Yes.
And I'm gonna say it's probably been 20 years since we've looked at boundaries.
Has it been that long? Okay. Everybody else okay with that? Okay. You guys have any more questions for Karen? All right, Karen, I may be in touch in case any additional questions come up, but we appreciate you coming tonight.
Absolutely.
Thank
Thanks
you.
for having me.
And I'll be in touch. Thanks.
Great.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
everyone.
Okay,
Thank you.
bye-bye.
Good night.
And I'll get a copy of this to you guys via email. Okay, I'm gonna jump to the next action or informational items. We have 2 principals here. Welcome. Who's up first? Ms. Haroldson from Great Lakes.
Didn't know Aaron and I were gonna bring in such a crowd. All right, all right, just here to present some updates on Great Lakes Elementary. Starting with some celebrations. One thing I like to start these board meetings with is just recognizing my staff. Our theme this year has been Top Gun, and I found that there's nothing that we need to know in life that isn't covered in Top Gun. That's been, and what I want to say is that they're dialed in and they're focused. We had some rough spouts, like late October into December, but like right now things are really good. We're dialed in and focused for the next part of the year. Another celebration that I didn't get to bring to the board the last time around because the data was embargoed and I didn't want to get in trouble with Kate. We did move up a category to exceeding expectations. And again, I would give that credit to our support staff, our teachers, our parents, other stakeholders for really working hard and navigating that pandemic together because we're still dealing with that impact on some of our data. Progress toward our goals. I'm going to talk about the data here in just a minute. And then something just kind of fun, more normalcy. The winter celebrations coming up February 17th. So we look forward to taking our students sledding, snowshoeing, the hot chocolate, skating. Usually we go out to Saha and do the outdoor stuff. So really excited to get that going. I mentioned our data a little bit, and I'm not going to dwell too much on this, but like if you look at our kindergarten, first grade reading and math, I took this from our new assessment suite. FastBridge, we're continuing to see more kids in those lower risk categories and less kids in that red, which is the high risk category. Same thing with the A reading and A math assessments. This is grades 2 through 5, both in reading and math. Still want to get that 11% of students out of that red category in reading and that 6% out of that red category in math, but happy to see the progress with that. Just an overview of our school goals. In the fall, we had about 54% of our kids met the 40th percentile or higher On the decodable words in the A reading assessments, our goal by the end of the year was to have 85% reaching that 40th percentile or higher. For math, same goal, but we had 68% of our kids meeting the 40th percentile. We want to move that to 85%. So how are we doing with that? Oh, why the challenge is first, I'll skip back. How are we doing with that? Oh, here we go. This is how we're doing. Okay, so in reading, we actually are up from 55% to 73% meeting the 40th or higher national percentile in reading. The other note I want to put on there, 89%, 315 out of our 353 kids are some risk or higher. So that means they aren't, that those 11% are not in that high risk category. Math, we moved from, I have to correct something. Reading, I think, should be 63%. It was about an 8% gain. So I'm sorry. I must have, when I was copy pasting, I left the 73. Math went from 68 to 73% meeting benchmark, 40th or higher. 95% are some risk or higher. So again, less kids in that statistical category where they're likely to struggle with reading and math. Very proud of the staff effort with that. Challenges we're dealing with. Again, one of these times I want to come to these board meetings and say, you know what, we have 0 kids in that high risk category or that below basic category on district and state assessments. It seems that we're getting closer in some cases down to 5 or 6% of our kids in that category, but we're not stopping until we get to 0. When I look through those kids individually, one of the challenges we're still working on is attendance for a pocket of those kids who are not achieving. It's not for lack of effort. I mean, I've got Eva Gray, our district social worker. I've got Sam Berman sitting right behind me. I've got Becky Nicola. I mean, we're going to houses, knocking on doors, trying to get them to school. Unfortunately, I mean, if the door isn't getting answered, we can't, you know, that's our limitation. So we're trying, but really when I look, especially at those, a few of those upper grade kids, it's the attendance piece that we haven't quite figured out yet. As far as action steps, because I showed our CIP goals for reading, we continue to work on fluency. Fluency is a really important indicator. Like if a kid is not scoring in the 50th percentile or higher in fluency, that's an indicator there's something deeper going on with them. Talking a lot about vocabulary work and building background knowledge and pulling some deeper text into our small group reading instruction. Phonics and word work, prefixes, suffixes, multisyllabic words, making sure that is in place systemically. State tests as well as some of our district assessments have shown some struggles in that area. Writing, working to establish simple bare minimum essentials at each grade level with a focus on improving sentence structure, eventually building that into paragraphs and 5-paragraph essays by the end of their 5th grade experience. And then prioritization with intensive interventions. I just did some work with our EMLSS teacher, and I have to say, when you guys are talking about fiscal challenges and some of the stuff from that capacity study, the EMLSS teachers are a must-have. Them combined with the work my regular ed teachers and support staff are doing at for core instruction and for tier 2 in our RTI system is that's, I think that is really key. It probably won't be the first time I'm up in front of the board saying that. A really important piece of that. For math, we continue to focus on fact fluency. Our homework focus, and I appreciate all the effort parents have put in with this. I want all kids automatic and proficient with fact fluency. We got to be done with any kids not having that with automaticity and proficiency. Adherence to quick practice daily routines. This is an important part of our math expressions curriculum that we really committed to before the pandemic, and I think made a difference as we went through the pandemic and continues making a difference right now. We have some discussion on word problem focus and intervention. We're still stumbling a little bit on district and state testing with story problems in math that have multi steps. So that's a challenge we have to continue to work on. I talked about the progress. The only thing I want to check is my reading. I think it was 55 to 63. I'll double check that. So I apologize if I made a mistake. Are there any questions? Okay, well, I appreciate it.
Nice job, Maverick.
Sorry. The more important. A lot of my Great Lakes families, their kids are.
Thanks, Ryan. All right, we have Mr. Liebers here from the middle school. Welcome.
All set? All right, good evening, Aaron Liebers, principal at the middle school. I'd like to talk a little bit about some celebrations as well. One of the things that we're really proud of is the way we started off the school year. BAR, Building Assets, Reducing Risk, was implemented in 6th grade, and I'd like to make a plug to push that along for our 7th and 8th grade teams next year. I think we're on the right track to do that. But also revisiting PBIS, getting back to those school-wide expectations, starting the school year off with all grade assembly and setting the stage for a success for these kiddos this year. Like Ryan had mentioned, the last couple of years have been a real challenge, and we really wanted to get at climate, culture, and those kinds of things here at the middle school. So another celebration, we wanted to create a welcoming environment for our kids coming in the door and our families coming in the door. One of the ways we've done that is looked at how we're utilizing our teachers during supervision time. So we don't really want to call it supervision, we want to call it welcoming environment, and putting them in place to be welcoming to our students as they show up in the door, at the front door each day. So our teachers are rotating through in the mornings before school starts, when buses are letting off kids and parents are dropping off students at the front door, and our staff are down welcoming kids as they come into the building. We wanted to create a great environment just to get the day started off right. And finally, another celebration among many that we could be talking about, but just a truly dedicated staff to wanting to see real positive change for our middle school. So that goes from our teachers to our paraprofessionals, our cooks in the kitchen, and our custodial staff, bus drivers coming in and visiting with us. Really, really proud of all the work that we've been putting in so far this year. Some of the challenges, I like to think of this as continuous work. A couple of following areas. Truancy is one of those areas, like Ryan had mentioned, that it's a real challenge. One of the things that we're seeing some real improvements on is the number of skipping students in our class, in our hallways. And another positive outcome that we're seeing is getting those parents in the front door and having some meetings and setting the stage. So 2 different things with truancy, kids not showing up for school at all. And another area at the middle school level is students that are at school but not attending their classes where they're supposed to be. So we've made some gains in those areas, but still it's an ongoing work. And then we can't talk about middle school, I guess, without talking about some disruptive behaviors. Couple things here. One, we are seeing an increase in disruptive behaviors, yes. But students are in their classes more because we've targeted some of those skipping that area of skipping. But also another challenge along with the disruptive behaviors is the sub shortages that we see. You know, each day the middle school is on the list for 2 or 3 or 4 shortages with substitute teachers. And it just creates inconsistency, and we see more behaviors in those environments. Here are our school goals developed with shared leadership team and CIP team in August. By the end of this school year, 100% of our students, staff, and families will report feeling safe at school, as evidenced by the end of the year perception surveys. This really was developed in large part because much higher percentage than I feel comfortable with stated that they did not feel safe at school last year. So it's an area that we really need to be targeting. Our second goal, our academic goal, will meet or exceed the state average of students who are proficient or advanced on the forward exam. So that's another area that we need to make some significant improvements on at the middle school. Some of the action steps that we've put in place to address our 2 goals. Again, I talked about it a little bit already. PBIS expectations school-wide started off the year great, and we revisited our school-wide expectations upon return from winter break. Safe and Responsive Task Force looked at the code of conduct this summer, and we've implemented a lot of those strategies, and we've been more consistent about what happens when students are stepping out of line and our response in the classroom and our response as a school. Couple of examples of that. We've updated our Spartan grade. We've got that committee together to look at our cell phone expectations, our locker expectations for students, and our PBIS team really working hard on putting plans in place to not only recognize kids when they are making improvements in their behavior with positive behavior rewards, celebrations, and things of that nature, but also really solidifying the teams and putting those expectations in front of us. Again, I spoke about it briefly with Bar and our 6th grade program. We're really seeing some positive impacts from that. Again, it's about building assets, talking about student strengths, and when we're dealing with students and any of those behavioral concerns. So really focusing in on the positive and finding strategies that really work for each individual kid. That's ongoing work too, as well as restorative practices. That's another component of the Safe and Responsive Task Force, putting together restorative practices training, each and every staff development. That's an ongoing practice, as well as our staff meetings. Family engagement was another area that we wanted to improve upon. So I look at communication coming into the building and going out from the building. We've done a lot of work in the area of family engagement. Our newsletter has a Google form where families can fill out information and provide information if they don't feel comfortable calling. We also are really trying to increase the amount of opportunities our teachers have during the week to communicate with families based on if there's a student issue that they need to talk about. We've given an hour a week for all of our teachers to be able to communicate with families, and that's going really well. Additionally, we're just really trying to create a positive, welcoming environment in the front office. I've made a concerted effort to improve outcomes for our visitors coming into the front office so that they're greeted friendly and getting the help that they need when they come in. A couple more quick action steps. Our PLCs, we've got a lot of new folks in the building, establishing norms, bringing data to the table each and every time they meet. PLCs are meeting weekly. And then really wanted to look at what I need. It's between second and third hour. This was really a big move for our SLT, myself, and our coaches to really establish win routines, how those are working. And then we really looked at reading interventions during our win hour, along with math interventions or other classroom interventions. That's definitely an area of need in our buildings, providing time and an opportunity for students to get what they need. Okay, a little bit of progress updates. So again, the SLT and our instructional coaches, we've been really working on those restorative practices. It's ongoing. I'd like to see our teams circling up with students even more than they are. And then our SLT will be rolling out in next week during staff development, some tier 1 engagement strategies. So really looking forward to that work. It's ongoing. Again, we talked about it already. WAN's got to focus on reading and interventions for small groups. So get those kids what they need. I'm really proud that we brought intramurals back. It took us a while to get the ball rolling, but it's been on hiatus. This is all about getting kids active in the afternoon and connecting them to our school, providing some after-school opportunities. And then our progress on behaviors, I got a little bit of information here. 85% of our students are tier 1. That's a good place to be. I'm happy with that number. I think it could be a little bit better. We're hoping to see some improvements in the next year or two on that. 5% of our kids are at tier 3. I think that number is a little bit high. We'd like to see that 3 to 5%, closer to the 3% range. Here's some statistics compared to last year. Our trends, classroom behaviors are still where the majority of the behaviors are occurring. Behaviors that are on the rise are disrespect and insubordination. Behaviors on the decline from last year, abusive language, and skipping is quite a bit down from last year. So again, we're looking at what are the areas that we've been focusing on, and we're seeing some improvements in that. Along with skipping, hallway behaviors are on the decline compared to last year. How are we responding to students that need extra support? We got 45 plus kids on a SST plan for behaviors. We have 41 students receiving tier 2 supports in Check and Connect. We have 10 students receiving tier 3 supports in Insight class. We have 10 students receiving tier 3 in-depth classes with our social worker for tobacco and vaping cessation. Another 23 students getting started in small groups. These interventions take time. They take 6 to 12 weeks typically. And we saw kind of a bump in some of these behaviors, the insubordination and disrespect between Thanksgiving and Christmas. And that's been how we've been trying to respond, getting these kids intervened right away, and so that those they get the support that they need. So that's kind of like the behavioral update for the middle school. I know it's an ongoing thing, but really proud of the work of our teams. It's been a real focus this year, and I think we're starting to see some of those benefits play out. So that's all I got.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you. All right, we have our student representative, Aaron, here.
Thanks.
You're up.
So today we kicked off our snow week with Dynamic Duo Day. Tomorrow will be Heatwave versus Cold Front. Wednesday will be wearing pink. Thursday we're going to be dressing to impress and for a movie premiere. And then Friday will be class colors and our assembly in the afternoon. Freshmen will be wearing white, sophomores wearing red, juniors blue, and seniors orange. Winter sports have been going well, with boys basketball having a winning record, girls basketball on a 16-game win streak. Boys hockey got the 3rd seed in conference, and girls hockey is currently ranked #1 in state. And then FESI also celebrates all of our sports by having different announcements every day, updating us on how all of our teams are doing. On Wednesday, Student Council will be presenting to our staff about our Courage Retreat that will be happening on March 8th. We have our Valentine's Day decorations up. The Spartan Head scavenger hunt is going great, and we'll be wrapping up on Wednesday night as well. And then on Friday, Pledge Makers will be hosting a video game and rec night for students who are Pledge Makers. That's all I've got.
The Courage Retreat is the student-led wellness retreat. Could you share some highlights at the next board meeting from how that goes? I don't, maybe you won't, maybe you'll
I think it might be
after, yeah. Or maybe you could bring a student or two to talk about like what you guys are doing. It's a pretty impressive wellness retreat that the students are leading at high school, right? Yeah, I think people would love to hear more about that.
Yeah.
Is it new then, or how many?
Yeah, this will be the first year that.
Oh, great.
They are bringing in a speaker to talk about mental health and suicide prevention for all the students. And then they're doing some small group activities to follow up as a half-a-day event.
Yep, and we're partnering with Hope Squad as well to
Awesome.
help put it on too.
But the Students Council has planned it and led the charge, so it's pretty cool.
Wonderful.
How many are planning to go or attend?
All students.
Really?
It's for all students.
Oh, okay.
You can expect a recap too. It'll be fun with all the kids' expectations and.
Great.
the whole day.
All right, thanks so much.
Hi, Aaron.
Okay, with that, I'm going to combine the last informational item and the first action item. The board has the ability to consider lacrosse as a co-curricular high school sport for both male and female athletes for the 23-24, that says 23-24, but 23-24 school year. If you are not aware, WIAA has recently announced that they are endorsing or sponsoring sanctioning lacrosse. So with that,
Actually, I was hoping if this is, Kyle's not here, if it's possible to make a motion to move comments made by the public prior to the action item of the board considering lacrosse.
here's my recommendation. I think Ella should provide some information.
Agree.
I think you should open up for public comment, and then
That's what I wanted. Can I move that up on the agenda, or do we have to have a motion?
you can kind of talk through it as part of my informational item. I think you can bring public comment after Ella's done. Is that okay, Lynn?
Yep.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, as Amy said, I just want to give a little bit of background as far as through the WIA lens, and kind of logistically what they would look like in my office and department, adding another sport, and then receive members with more information for you. One of the first meetings I had when I was kind of training in to be this program was meeting with some youth lacrosse board members. This is a strong youth program in our community. There's a lot of numbers, and it's an opportunity for a lot of kids to be involved in the sports. So if you look at it that way in the lens of getting kids involved, looking at our high school goals of making kids feel valued and want to be a part of something. Adding this would be a very large opportunity for that. The WIA has recognized now lacrosse being an official sport. Both boys and girls lacrosse would take place in the springtime. The schedule will look very similar to girls softball, starting typically our spring break week and going through the first weekend of June. Competitions take place at the high schools. They can be on turf fields or grass fields. Our facilities can handle that. There would be some moving around of schedules to make sure that all teams had fair access to different surfaces. That's something that could be done in my office. But as far as facility wise, we have the facilities to take on 2 teams. I was approached by the Duluth-Superior lacrosse organization. What would it take to get our programs into a varsity level? I can tell you that one of the biggest concerns is right now the number of kids we have in the programs are playing in a club level in the state of Wisconsin. Now that the WIA has adopted it to be an actual sport, the likelihood of that club organization completely going away is pretty high. There are many schools. The Minnesota State High School League does have lacrosse as a sanctioned sport. Up until this point, Wisconsin could not compete against Minnesota schools at a high school level because the Minnesota State High School League says you can only compete against sanctioned sports. So Minnesota was sanctioned, Wisconsin was not, so our varsity teams could not play against their varsity teams. So that would add, along with our competition, we would be members of the Lake Superior Conference if we adopted that in our high school, no different than 90% of our teams are right now. So travel would not be daunting. Competitions, like I said, would be held at the complex. Right now, Proctor, Hermantown, Duluth, Grand Rapids, all currently have lacrosse programs. Duluth Marshall is working on adding lacrosse programs. I can tell you just from hearsay, it's Hudson will probably get a WI sanctioned team. And many of the schools in the big rivers that are located next to college campuses are kind of leaning towards that adding of a lacrosse program. Lacrosse is becoming more and more popular everywhere. It's a inexpensive sport to add, especially at the college level, to add more enrollment. I know that there's talks at UWS. I've been in communication with their athletic director. That's another thing, you know, if and when they get complex and areas to play, they would love to add the sport as well. So there would be that post high school opportunities right in our own backyard as well. I think one of the biggest things that we look at is budget and expenses. I did a lot of comparing of 18-game schedule, travel schedule, lacrosse equipment and supply budget. And I'd say it's probably most comparable to boys soccer right now. I'd say if we added a boys and girls program, we'd probably need about $40,000 to cover coaching expenses, supplies, travel, and then game workers, officials. And that's pretty comparable to boys soccer.
Both
We talked about
girls and boys is
20.
Oh, okay.
Yep. I think there's a lot more facts that I've kind of asked the people that are involved with the program to speak on tonight. Do you have any more questions as far as the capacity of our high school and our programs to be able to take that on?
I think I'd like to wait until we make a motion.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Yeah, me too. I've got questions, but I'll wait till we have discussion.
All right.
You may need to answer some later.
Yeah, sounds good.
Yeah, so don't run away.
Okay.
All right, so on the comment list, starting out with Brad Roden.
Well, thank you for having us here tonight. I'd first of all like to thank the families and the players who came out to support us this evening. But a little bit first, how did we get here? My son was a lacrosse player in high school in 2017. At that time, the Duluth Public Schools agreed to take lacrosse on. That's when the Minnesota State High School League said, yep, we're going to sanction it. the Duluth Public Schools took it on. They said, Brad, your son's no longer welcome to play here. So then we moved up to Proctor, and the Proctor Association said, yeah, we're going to remain in the club level forever. Your son can play here as long as he'd like. And then the following school year, Proctor said, Brad, your son's no longer able to play here. He's not in Minnesota high school. So that's when I decided I would start the program in my kitchen that night, 2002. Historically, since that time, we've had numbers anywhere from 100 to 150 players in the youth, which would be U8 up through the high school level. Right now, our largest groups are the U12 and U14, and that's particularly important with the decision we have here tonight. Those kids will face that because, like Ella had said earlier, the transition happened in Minnesota about 2 years ahead of Wisconsin, but now that the WIA has taken on the sport, the vast majority of the schools that I've been in communication with at the high school level are going to opt to take that route and go into the WIA. So that means the Wisconsin Lacrosse Federation, the club level program will likely just be phased out, similar to what happened in Minnesota. So I said that U12, U14s are largest numbers historically. It's interesting to note that we have had 2 players in the short amount of time actually play at the collegiate level. So that was pretty impressive. Cheaters on. We do, if you've read the handout, I did circulate it to Ella. I'm sure she got it to you. We do have some interested coaches at the high school level. So we've solved some of those issues. Ella spoke a little bit about capital. Lacrosse is a low cost of capital for investment. And like she said, there's a lot of universities, a lot of schools, particularly Marshall, where I'm on the board, they're using that to try to attract and drive an enrollment. So, and we're a financially sound organization. So if the high school does choose to take on the sport, we will hand over our reserves in the program to the high school. So that's a positive. So, but lastly, I understand there's budget considerations that need to be discussed and reviewed, and I would just ask if the board chooses not to vote favorably on it this year, that we keep the conversations ongoing, and I have the opportunity to present the future. So that's it.
Thank you. All right, thank you.
Thanks.
I think just give them a heads up if they reach 3 minutes, and then, yeah.
All right, next we've got Aaron Anderson.
All right, yep, I'm Aaron Anderson. I'm just here to speak in favor of adding high school lacrosse to the high school here. I'm a fan of it. I'm a parent of a player, and I'm also a lacrosse coach and a high school football coach. In 2018, when they started the program, I didn't really know much about it. Didn't want to do it, so we decided to do it, and I fell in love immediately, become a fan of it. It's a great game. Kids have a lot of fun playing it, and I know it developed passion in them. As a dad, I love to see that, because my son has developed that passion for competing. He has gone on, we've gone from a kid who never wanted to go to any practices as a kid to all of a sudden wanting to go there and not come home. So as a dad, that's pretty cool to see. As a coach, kind of why I'm speaking out in favor of this is I believe in the multi-sport athletes. As a coach, I think it's great for kids to do multiple sports and not just specialize in one sport. I don't believe in that specialization. I just think the development of a kid, development of all athletes is good to have multiple choices at that high school level. So that's kind of why I'm speaking out in favor of that. Those are just some of the reasons. I think in this area with the youth program and all the kids that are there, that it could be a pretty cool sport at the high school. So I just want to thank you for that time. The one other thing is, I think that I should mention is there are some referees in the area too that would support the sport as well, because that's a consideration as well. Sometimes getting referees is a big deal, especially for a new sport, but there are in this area that can do that.
Thank you.
All right, next we got
Thomas isn't going? Oh, Thomas is going.
Thompson.
My name is Thomas Anderson. I'm in 7th grade at SMS. I've been playing lacrosse since 3rd grade. I love playing lacrosse because it's exciting and engaging. I'm asking the board to support lacrosse at the high school level so I can continue to play.
Thank you.
Good job, Thomas.
Clint Thursby.
I don't want to follow him. All right, well, thank you for allowing me a couple minutes to speak to you guys tonight. I am speaking in favor of hopefully getting you to adopt lacrosse. And I know if I was on your side, I wouldn't want to be hearing the same points and arguments over and over. So in an attempt to avoid repetition, I'm going to briefly tell you about the impact that lacrosse has had on my family. My daughter's a senior at the high school, and upon reaching middle school, she found herself very frustrated and somewhat lost after some significant injuries, including a torn meniscus, made it extremely difficult to continue on with her initial passion, which was gymnastics. Fortunately, she was introduced to lacrosse and found a new love. For the past 6 or 7 years, lacrosse has given her an opportunity to stay active, to be part of a team, to build relationships, and to learn many important life lessons. I'm glad to say she's going to continue on next year to play at the collegiate level at UW Lacrosse. We're happy that she's able to continue to pursue her passion for the sport that she loves, and that she'll have additional structure and support to help her succeed in college. My son is in 7th grade at the middle school. He's here tonight. He's also been involved in lacrosse for the last 5 to 6 years, and after trying and struggling to find his passion in many other sports, he's found a home in lacrosse. He's also benefited through the many relationships and life lessons that have been gained through the sport. He's always talked about hoping to play lacrosse in high school and possibly even beyond. And while I don't know if that's actually an option, I'll do anything I can to avoid having to look him in the eye and tell him that he won't have an opportunity to pursue that dream because the sport is no longer supported in this area. My understanding of the reality is that with the sanctioning, as it's already been explained tonight, if the district declines to adopt lacrosse, the kids will have nowhere to play after 8th grade. We're just asking you to provide an opportunity for the many kids that have been working towards this dream, many of them for 9 years or more by the time they reach high school. If this comes down to logistical or financial concerns, let's address those individually and see if there's a way we can work them out. As parents, teachers, coaches, administrators, and board members, we should all be working to provide the kids the best opportunity to grow and succeed whenever possible. After reviewing the materials on the district website, I didn't find anything within the mission, the vision, the profile, the collective commitments, or the strategic plan that spoke to nor supported restricting opportunities for the students. In fact, I found a lot of language, themes, goals, and commitments that spoke directly to the opposite. I thank you for taking the time tonight.
Thank you.
Dylan's, is it Scandal?
Hello, my name is Dylan Scandal. I'm a 7th grader at SMS. I've been a team member of the Superior Lacrosse team for 3 years. I'm speaking to you today because my team and I want to keep playing throughout high school. The only way we could do that is if the lacrosse teams become a high school sport. That is why you should vote for lacrosse to become a high school sport for the Superior Spartans. Please consider the idea so that the Spartans can include and make lacrosse a sport for the Superior Spartans all the way through high school level. Thank you.
Jocelyn Scandal.
Hi. That is hard to follow, especially when she's my daughter. Jossie Scandal, thank you guys for taking the time tonight. I currently coach the U14, U12 girls lacrosse team. And just wanted to reiterate the strong program that we would be able to feed the high school, adopting the lacrosse program into the high school level. We've got a great system. Dylan started playing lacrosse 3 years ago, knowing nothing about the sport, and nor did I, and worked with some great people through the Superior Lacrosse team and coaching staff to figure out how to coach lacrosse, how to learn to play lacrosse, and now how to feed these girls and teach them lessons that are going to carry them far in life, far beyond lacrosse. So it's a great program. I think you'll be very pleased. You'll have another women's winning team at the high school level, probably outdoing the boys once again. But just wanted to follow up Dylan's statements with, I hope that she continues to play at the high school level. Thank you.
Right. All right, I will read the action item one more time. Consideration of lacrosse as a co-curricular Superior High School sport for male and female athletes starting in the spring of 2023-24 school year.
Move to approve. Second.
Motion and a second. Move into discussion.
I just think it's important that everybody tonight knows, this is an action item to move it to the next meeting, not necessarily to approve it tonight. The actual approval happens next week.
I can't believe how fast the WIA moved on something. So I have a couple questions, Bella, for you, but comment first. It is very similar soccer, and what we did with soccer back when I was the activities director, it was the same thing. It was a club sport. They were very instrumental in helping promote the sport in the community. Promote it as a wonderful opportunity for our kids, and they too provided initial financial assistance when it became a high school sport at the high school. The budget itself, I'm sure I can't speak for everybody here, but the budget part of it is something that I know that I need to look at very closely. So the actual budget saying it's about 20,000 and stuff, I'm assuming that we will have a head coach and an assistant coach. These are maybe things that we could get by the next meeting. I don't want to put a lot of work on you, but a survey done with our current high school kids or middle school students to see how many kids were interested in the sport of lacrosse. I know we have the numbers and I really appreciate that. Don't get any of the message wrong here, okay? So was there an opportunity for our kids at the high school who may benefit from this for the next couple of years? Was there a survey? And if there wasn't, that's fine, but if we have some information, that would help. Equipment, safety equipment. I know that there isn't a lot of equipment involved with the sport itself. However, when I think of football, when we supply the helmet, when we supply the shoulder pad, in the budget for their equipment, will we be taking care of that as a district? And that doesn't have to be answered, but that's just.
I can speak to that. Last year, we transitioned in the sport hockey because we did research around the area. People have to provide their own equipment. So we pay for uniforms, to make sure all of our, the coaches set up a store at Play It Again, right? And so here's 4 or 5 different options that will all be fine. Not everybody has to have the top of the line. They have to be navy blue breezers and a navy blue helmet.
And NOXI approved.
What's that?
The helmets have to be approved.
Correct. Yep. So they have to be purchased and have all the safety, and that's a WIA.
Correct.
So moving forward with lacrosse, it'd be the same idea. That equipment would be purchased. We would work with the youth programs. We'd work with a local vendor. Being you could buy this in middle school and it could last you a few years, hoping that we're not doubling up on things. But yes, that equipment budget would be supplies needed to run a practice. The actual safety equipment would be on a family to purchase. And we also have funds for those families that might need help financially with it to make sure that all kids have the opportunity to play.
Has the WIA set a limit of number of games?
Yep, 18.
18 for regular season.
Yep, so they have their, obviously you're familiar with it, but the season regulations, that goes from how many can play, how old you have to be, X, Y, and Z. They do have that approved at the executive level. So you can find that online as well, but I can send that out or make that available to you.
And as far as the conference, I know in the presentation, which was very well done, I can tell you this, is that had the opportunity to speak to 2 of the Eau Claire schools due to refereeing a basketball game for them. And they are seriously looking at moving towards adopting lacrosse at the high school level. So that speaks well that more teams in our Big Rivers Conference, we have the crossover with the Minnesota Conference. I think it's important that the Wisconsin schools get on board. I don't need to go there with sometimes what happens with Minnesota schools and having to play Minnesota teams, but I think it's really important that that's happening. The spring of the year, number of participants, boys and girls, there are less spring activities for girls than there are boys. A concern is the watering down all the time. However, However, not all kids are baseball players. However, all kids are not track runners or discus throwers or shot putters or tennis players or golfers and stuff. So I think this, in my opinion, this opens up just another great opportunity for our community and for all of our kids in our community. So I probably spoke too much, but no, that's my feeling on this.
Have some feelings.
Yes.
Well, I just want to say, anytime that we can add something for our students to play a sport in high school, it's better than them sitting home on a computer, on a phone, or I'd rather than be all playing, right? I'm all in favor of that. Not crazy that the WIAA did the boys and the girls both in the spring. I would have rather seen it split spring, fall, just like the soccer. So I'm not opposed to that. I'm curious about logistics. That's kind of my concern. Especially now, I just saw this past weekend where the Superior City FC has got a men's and women's soccer program starting both in the spring. And they're already advertising they're going to be playing on the Spartan Sports Complex. So you've got,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying?
Absolutely, and I will assure, and I know that's a big thing too, but I've had many conversations with them, along with UWS, because they use our.
They use it too.
Well, I think our teams would take priority.
They would. I'm just saying it's creating a logistic nightmare for you.
Yes and no.
Well.
So right now, we have 3 grass fields across 28th Street, right? The majority of the rentals right now are the youth lacrosse program. I'd have to break it to them that the youth might have to practice somewhere else, but those would take priority as well. So we have essentially 4 full fields for soccer and lacrosse. We also have utilized the baseball turf in the fall for overflow practices. So once baseball's done, then if we needed that practice time for our lacrosse or for a girls soccer practice and a rotation, then we would use that turf as well. So all partners know that the Spartans get first usage at all of our fields too.
Is it been determined yet what nights that lacrosse has games?
That's totally up in the air. We most aren't as structured as Tuesday, Thursday, so it would be around other things. So with that, there's a freedom to make sure that's not doubling up on games. And all games for all of our outdoor turf people would be on the turf.
And do we know yet if there'd be enough for a JV or a varsity and a JV yet?
I think eventually they talked a lot about the 7th grade class. It seems the numbers are large enough at that point. It could be a process. It could be a registration process. Maybe we learned in a survey, if we came out with that, how many we'd have. A lot of times programs will start with a JV only for their first year and try to bump up numbers and then move into a varsity program. The thing with this though, we're not starting from the ground up. So there is a high school level team right now in action. Whether we have enough numbers for that would have to be kind of one of those. If we approve this, that would be top of the list to start working together with the lacrosse community too. But yeah, that field reservation, I 100% know that that's.
And even if some have to go over to we'll call it the swamp.
Sure.
There could be lighting issues.
Right.
That's another thing that could be a problem.
Yep.
Getting into the darkness. What else did I have? That's just, those are my questions, my concerns.
And I think making sure everybody knows that.
Yes, question.
Well, just adding on to sharing all the fields, I will say this past fall with sharing between football and soccer, I know it's just 2 sports, but it definitely we definitely saw an improvement this year compared to years in the past where football is kind of just taken over versus soccer being pushed to the swamp. So.
I know that the high school sports are going to take precedence, obviously, but then I do worry about the younger sports, even soccer, because I know lacrosse and soccer kind of really struggle to find fields to use for practices. Are we able to find other places for those younger kids to practice because that's where they've normally done things?
Yeah, for sure. I think that this would be talking with the city. I think there are a lot of spaces that I'm not sure if we're utilizing. The middle school field, I think we could really keep an upkeep more maybe on that.
I know we currently use elementary space instead of middle school spaces.
Yep, absolutely.
For youth leagues.
And are we trying to keep it somewhat fair for all the sports? Like one team doesn't just come in and grab all of the space right away. It's not first come, first serve, is it? Or are we trying to work with the multi-sports as well?
Yeah, and Bria in facilities and myself have been working to try to make sure it's not that situation.
Okay.
And that's not just outdoor sports. Sure. A lot of indoor stuff and
Basketball.
gyms and all of
Oh,
that.
it's,
Say,
so,
I would argue that that's a great problem to have.
Yeah.
That we have more kids wanting to play and doing that, and I'll take on that challenge and that role any day to make sure that we can fulfill that. But I don't we're not necessarily adding a ton more people that are going to use the spaces, just when and where, right? Like the lacrosse people are already using all the fields, but I get your point because that's something that I deal with too. But yeah, for sure, using a rotation or.
But that brings up a good point about being a spring sport. You really don't get outside very early. So,
Right.
and a lot of people inside, and I'll say it's already congested with baseball when track is in there.
Yep.
And then, sometimes we've been scheduling to where people are going from 7, 8 o'clock at night. And then you had 2 more teams.
Yeah.
You're going,
And can I ask a question though? I mean, the team already exists, right?
Yeah, but-
So are they already using your space?
not inside.
They
Not
come
that I
in
know.
after.
They come in
our
as after?
sports
Okay.
Right now.
Okay.
And I know they use other buildings as well. And I think really utilizing, UWS Westman Arena, the guy that runs that talks about when the ice comes out, he contacted me this year asking, do we need a place to hit baseballs and throw stuff? So I know that was something I passed on to the club as well. Right now we don't have the space because I have 6 sports that need to be inside, but that's an option, renting facilities over there. So that's another.
But that's another cost.
Which, yes, yeah, it would be if we needed to. But also, that would be an opportunity for programs that typically might use our gym space after our spring sports. They would utilize it, try to keep our high school kids in high school.
Well, what about field dimensions and field markings then? If this were to become a high school sport, what changes need to be done on the current complex?
Right now, every spring, they come in and mark the field with turf paint, removable turf paint. That they do that a few times in the season. My ultimate goal, working with David, is when we get our turf replaced, we would just add lacrosse lines along with.
So in the interim, we would go out and spray the arc and
Which already.
they would come into it.
They do that
Okay.
already.
Yep.
Where is the sport played right? Like where are their games right now? The lacrosse games?
I would say there's a handful on the turf.
Okay.
They also play out throughout the community. A lot of the youth games are across the fields, or across the street in 28th Field, Great Lakes, Priest Field. Yeah, community locations right now.
Okay.
There are a handful that play on the turf, and they schedule around our stuff. So it's weekend games.
Yeah, and I wouldn't want that, like you were saying, like equity would be important too. But yeah, when I think about like 26 to 30 more games because it's boys and girls at one point, I'm like, oh my gosh, but I trust would know how to do that. So.
Oh, yeah. So half of that because home and away.
Yeah, right. Okay. Yep. Thank you.
And again, I think in the grand scheme of the amount of games that are played on our turf already, it might add 1 or 2. You know, so it's a sport that is functioning very highly right now. It would just fall under our.
Another thing is that S is going to have the new complex off of Belknap within a year. That takes their 2 teams off the field.
Yeah. And that would be a push of the hope. That opens up another space for rentals.
It takes money away from us.
Yeah, it takes money away, but
Well, and I should say when I'm saying about the rentals, it would be those that are under our program would stay, at the high school. The community program would have to look at other spots and later odd times on the field.
So I'm just kind of less popular person for a second here, so I apologize. As I do want every sport we can possibly have for the kids. I'm very much for the sports. I'm very much for adopting this. We got to keep looking at the budget ahead. $4.1 million deficit coming up. And we got to figure out how we get ourselves out of that deficit. I think before we start spending more and more money. This is $40,000 next year, 40,000 the next, 40,000 the next, maybe more, maybe less, I don't know. But it's a recurring debt when we have a deficit already we're looking at. When we look at fixing that $4.1 million deficit, we got to look across everything, whether it's staff, extracurriculars, whatever it is that's costing us money, we got to look at everything. And I think sports is something that got to be looked at too, with the amount of money we spend. Just looking and the information we have, we already spend $630 some on sports as it is. Again, 4.1 is not even the worst case scenario as far as the deficit. It could be worse than that coming up. So it's not that I'm against lacrosse. I'm really not. I want our district to have as much opportunity as we can. But when we start adding up costs, $40,000 for this, we got another thing later on in our agenda, $15,000. We did $35,000 for CISA a month or two ago. That's $90,000. That's a teacher. So we got to start looking at, when we talk about this deficit, teachers, sports, other stuff that's in our district. What's the importance here? And the only reason I guess I would say no right now is because we need to tackle the deficit stuff first. We need to tackle the money issues that our district is going to have and put this off until we can really look at it through a better lens of finances per se. Not totally get rid of it, but maybe it needs to be put off until we can figure out the deficit more.
You have any thoughts about that?
I think next year, could we afford $40,000? Yes, to get it up and running. Beyond that, we would take a look at co-curriculars as a whole and determine if there's something that could be removed because of participation or cost per member within that co-curricular. Short term, yes, we could add it for next year. Beyond that, the board would have to decide. I would recommend taking a look at the entirety of the co-curriculars every year.
And I do appreciate what you said. If it's a financial thing, like let's brainstorm together, let's figure it out. So I think taking a look at it as a whole would be a good idea.
Brad, you mentioned that the club has some money. I don't know.
Yeah, right now.
Like 12?
Fund, we have reserves of about $12,000 projected out this year. It might be 15,000 or so at the end of the year.
I know, I'm trying to recall Hermantown and Duluth when they brought lacrosse on. Boosters helped to offset the costs. Do they still do that? Maybe you guys know that, but.
Yeah, so the way that they function, and I'm pretty sure Grand Rapids does as well, is they're basically called a high school sport, but they function themselves. So they fundraise.
They self-sustain?
Yeah. I would not be in favor of that. I think that throws luck into a pond of, well, we're not as good as softball because we don't get funded by.
I would agree. My experience when I was in Duluth was that you had a group of students and families that were wanted to get it off the ground, but then as soon as that group kind of graduated, there wasn't a sustainable plan to keep that energy going. So then it caused challenges.
Yeah, and I think another thing, just getting kids, I trust that everything it's a great group of people over there as well. But getting it under our umbrella is our code and our our coaches that are hired, you know, through the district, and we have coach education programs that we use and regulations that they have to follow at the WIA too. It's just another level of kids being great and following that as well. But with that idea of, well, you don't fund us, why would we follow your rules? Why would we do this and that? You know, it's kind of hard to justify at times too. So I think it could happen. I trust that it could happen that way, but I would be opposed to having it any different than any of the other sports that we see.
How are participation fees decided, and when's the last time we revisited that? I would always want hardship exceptions, like you said, with the equipment, but I'm wondering what that looks like if, you know, Shannon's like, okay, we need to revisit this.
I think that needs to be part of our plan for next year, that we revisit all participation fees and see what they compare to other school districts.
Do we know how we compare to Duluth?
Or lower.
Yeah, I know that, but I didn't, we have.
It depends on the sport.
Do co-op sports reduce, I guess, our costs?
We essentially send a bill to the co-op school per kid. And we factor how much is it per kid.
We take the total cost of the program divided by 100. Yeah.
So I don't know, does like Maple have lacrosse?
I've not been approached by them. So co-ops are unique in that it would be an issue of, do we need more kids to sustain a program? And that's why we would co-op with them. I won't know that, and I would say we probably won't know that until we had the stuff up and running, a survey went out or something like that, but nobody's approached me.
We're currently co-oping what?
Not typically done purchases.
No, gymnastics, and then the girls hockey.
Boys and girls.
And boys and girls. And is that just with Northwestern?
Yep.
Historically, been very careful about co-oping, very, very careful.
And I anticipate, to be completely honest, the last time they started up, I obviously was not part of this, but I bring back a lot of talk about girls hockey, the massive co-ops that are in some of the different parts of the state. There's very few towns that support their own girls hockey program. We are a co-op with Northwestern, but a couple kids, and our numbers are growing. Success is up there, obviously. I know the WIA is worried about how co-ops exist and taking away to make super teams, if you will. Gymnastics is another example of that. Trying to get your people in your town to be the people that represent you. So I would anticipate some kind of caveat coming from the WIA regarding co-ops in lacrosse, just to get it started. Because once you start with a co-op, it's very hard.
How much time is needed from an approval from us to have lacrosse up and running?
I believe I read that we have June 1st, we have to declare we'll have a lacrosse program for the 23-24 teams. So
You would need to know by June 1st, or
it needs to be board action before June 1st for.
right, okay, so then you could use the summer to.
Right.
Okay.
Typically we like at least a year to get a schedule put together.
I had a Shannon question and maybe Ella, but like, I doubt it, but I'm like, does any revenue come from, you know, like as a parent, you gotta pay to go to the soccer games, then, you know, like.
Factor those in. We're looking at total cost.
Find that spreadsheet, thank you.
Oh,
So when Ella said 20,000, does that include the revenue and the expenses for the program?
Yeah, so
Okay.
spreadsheet you're referencing has the revenues. Numbers, well, the lacrosse revenue numbers are for charging. This year's the first year we've charged for all sports, especially those at the complex, and boys soccer this fall made a significant amount of money from admissions. So we would do that. So we would pull in, I factored that money into the lacrosse line. But of the rest of the sports, have that information. So I did factor that into the.
Thank you.
And I just would like to, one thing I'd like to see next week if this passes tonight is if you could put together kind of a plan of what field schedules would look like for all these teams, potentially. Just kind of a scenario on how you would balance all of that, games and practices. Be curious.
I'm just gonna reiterate my biggest concern in the future. People are asking if we're cutting staff, why we add more sports. That's gonna happen.
Is there any other questions, comments? All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed?
No.
Motion carries to move to next Monday.
Okay.
All right,
Next item.
next up. Board considers adopting new operating.
I mean, you guys are welcome to stay or you.
Can't stay if you'd like.
Thank you all for coming. Thank you.
Oh, they were gonna stay.
I know, but Brooke told me.
Well, you feel bad. You want them to know that they can go.
Want to hold the children hostage.
Yeah.
No, at the end you tell. I will be the one missing. It's fine.
All right, where was I at? Next action, board considers adopting the new operating principles based on the board retreat from January 23rd, 2023. Shall I read through the whole thing? Would you like me to?
Maybe you should have everybody pick one. I don't know. That's what we do in classrooms. So maybe you don't have that.
There's not enough.
Well, you could get through some of, you do whatever you.
Right to left.
Glenn is a fast reader.
The following are general accepted expectations and commitments for Superior School Board of Education members as drafted January 23rd, 2023. Members will ensure there is adequate time for board members to prepare and review all relevant materials, information, data, etc., related to the agenda items. Whenever possible, contact the district administrator with agenda questions well in advance of the meeting, allowing time for the district administrator and staff to gather pertinent information. Additional questions may still be presented during the board meeting as necessary. The next bullet point, we will conduct ourselves with integrity, honesty, and in a professional manner that reflects positively on the board and the district. We will hear each opinion, but ultimately act as one. We will speak candidly and courteously to each other and listen to dissenting or different viewpoints with an open mind. Once we reach a decision or compromise as a board, we will each support the will of the board in word, action, and deed. Last, when we have a difference of opinion, we will deliberate the facts of the situation and avoid negative emotions and/or body language. Board members agree to work to resolve any individual concern with fellow board members as soon as possible after a conflict arises. In support of these expectations and commitments, the district administrator will provide information, including but not limited to board packets, in a timely manner for the board to review prior to making a decision.
Move to approve.
Second. I have a motion and a second to adopt Superior School Board Group Operating Principles. Any discussion?
Work, respect, belong. You didn't read that.
Sorry.
I added that.
I just want to say that we are pretty much doing that already. I mean, as a board, we do work together pretty well, and I want to, compliment everybody. Sometimes we will have a couple hiccups here and there, but we do get through it.
And it was a good time to take a look because the last time we had done that was in 2018. So it was a good time to refresh.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Opposed? Motion carries. All right, next, the administration recommends approval of the WIAA Winter Sport Co-op Agreement for gymnastics for the 2023-24 annual renewal required with Maple.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second, discussion.
Can we see what the co-op agreement is, or do we have it?
I didn't attach it. There was.
The same?
Yeah, it's just, we do this annually. Ella, do you have anything?
Yeah, so it's for gymnastics, we have to do it annually. For all other sports, it's every 2 years.
Okay.
It's just basically saying that we're the whole school, we'll do all the work, your kids can participate with us, and we'll send you a bill.
How many Maple students do we have that participate?
For gymnastics, I think 2.
He's got all the information over here. He's been.
Yeah, the coach actually, Laura DeBars, she's her 2nd year and she's been doing great, but she teaches math at Maple High School, Northwestern. So
Somebody else want to say it?
You know, you're very informed. I love it.
What is the fee?
Well, you don't know until the end.
I mean,
we paid for it.
I'm sorry, what the activity fee for the student?
Same, isn't it?
I think it's 100 for two.
100. I couldn't remember what it was.
Like Shannon said, that's not the only thing we charge.
Right.
We take the whole
Everybody else wants it?
rental of the facility, cost of everything.
You can pass it.
and then-
Yep, I mean, I'll take it back over.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carried. Last, consideration of an overnight field trip request from Caitlin Knoll at the high school to attend Spear Days in Madison, Wisconsin.
Motion to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Is there any discussion?
Our kids and typically go down and represent our school district, and I get many positive remarks from legislators and community members when we have our kids present there.
Really thankful that they're doing it.
Looks like Aaron needs to sign at the bottom.
Who pays for the trip?
I believe this one is, they paid for it.
Assume
I
most,
believe, but I don't know, like, typically overnight trips, there should be a request out on here if anything, but I think they purchase it themselves, and then they possibly use the Angel Fund or their scholarship opportunities for those, like.
How are students picked to participate in this?
That I don't.
Okay. A part of a specific class. I know Caitlin oversees our senior project, but
Yes, was it through? I'm not.
Kyle, do you know?
I think Jim Hogan used to do it.
Okay.
I think this year it's Caitlin and maybe Mark Johnson.
Okay. So it's not part of a class.
It's not private class,
Okay.
and usually they, I think there's some kind of announcement early in the late fall if you're interested.
Okay.
We talked, because I had a student that I thought might be close. Back to Mark and said they've already picked the kid and stuff.
Oh, okay.
It's based on an announcement. If you're interested in politics and want to go to Madison, make a difference.
Okay.
That sounds like something that occurred earlier in the year. I didn't really pay attention to it.
Thanks, Aaron.
These have been going on
Yeah.
since fall.
Yeah.
So it's like after school, it's community led, so, yeah.
What a priceless investment, right? To have our kids representing our district when we're talking about funding at the state level and
Yeah.
the issues that really impact them here in our city. I mean, even if we were investing, I'd be all for it.
There's quite a few topics. One's like mental health that they're advocating for. The other is like addiction issues. Then there's a bunch of business initiatives as well. So they have all the topics planned out, and I'm sure prepping on which topics they're going to advocate for.
is there any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Carries.
Sorry, that was not agenda.
You had no discussion items?
That's it.
That concludes your report?
That concludes my report.
That, we'll move into the committee agendas, starting out with the Teaching and Learning Committee with Steve O.
No action items, no discussion items, but we have two informational items. First up, Crystal Hinson, Director of Curriculum and Instruction.
Hello, everybody. I have two quick updates for you.
The first is about summer school. Typically this time of year, I just come to share with you our plans for summer school. They are underway. We sent a communication to our staff and then followed up one to all the families to let them know that this year summer school will be ran at our middle school and high school as it usually is. However, as you may know, we have downsized the number of sites where we will host elementary summer school this year. So we will have Lake Superior and Great Lakes students attend summer school at Great Lakes. Northern Lights students will attend at Northern Lights. They're obviously our biggest school and our biggest enrollment. And then Four Corners, Bryant, and Cooper students will attend summer school at Cooper. So we will staff probably from a variety of buildings. We have lead teachers from the elementary schools that help kind of coordinate that, and we'll get the teams together to do the planning to make sure that it represents, you know, the students from all the schools that might be combined. Summer school begins Monday, June 19th, and it runs until July 20th for our 3K through 8th grade students, and then our high school students will go an additional week longer. We won't have summer school on Fridays. As we learned for several years in a row, that participation isn't always great on Fridays. We will also not host summer school the week of the 4th of July when the 4th falls in the middle of the week. We also know that participation is not great. Our summer school funding is tied to attendance. And so we have students register for summer school and we staff for that number of students. And then they don't attend, that does impact our funding. So attendance is important during summer school. We are excited we'll be able to host a drama camp at the middle school again. And the Spartan Strength and Conditioning group that meets at the high school for students will also be offered again as it has in the past. So that's just a few highlights about summer school. Do you have any questions about that? Okay, we have the basic information with dates and registration, like watch for registration coming soon, all on our district website. So if families ask at all, you can, you know, direct them to the website. We have a place there for that. And then my second item is just about our staff development days coming up. So you know what our teachers are going to be up to next week. Next Monday and Tuesday, our students won't be in school. We'll have staff development. We're really excited. Next Monday morning, all of our teachers will gather at the high school for a guest speaker. His name is Brian Mendler. He focuses on how to engage students that are struggling and how do you connect with them. So that's been the theme of some of our presentations this year and will continue to be something we learn about. We're giving the teachers a little bit of a longer lunch break on Monday because we know travel will be involved, and sometimes it's really nice for our teachers to get to go to eat, and sometimes you need a little bit extra time on those days. In the afternoon, all of our staff will be at their schools with their principals working on some of the Ryan talked about and Aaron talked about, where their schools are working on their goals and looking at data. On Tuesday morning, we will meet in subject area committees. Sometimes we also call them grade level teams. So for example, all of our first grade teachers in the district will meet together. All of our high school social studies teachers will meet together. And we'll work on curriculum, instruction, and assessment things that are important to those teams. And then in the afternoon, building principals will plan an agenda similar to how they did on Monday afternoon. So that will be the 2 days to start our week, one of them being Valentine's Day. Sometimes it's nice to not have all the sugar in the schools on Valentine's Day.
You just move it to the 10th.
Yeah.
Good point.
Do you have any questions about staff development? Okay, thanks.
Thank you. Next up, Kate Tesh, Director of Continuous Improvement and Assessment.
Hi, everybody.
Hi, Kate.
I am here with the statute around the AGR reports. I'm here on behalf of our elementary principals. So just a refresher, AGR, Achievement Gap Reduction. We receive funding through the state. That's a little more of Shannon's realm, but the requirement of getting some of that money is that we submit the principals, and I help support them, submit building reports on their data. This only applies to our school-wide title schools, so Four Corners is exempt from this reporting. So I'm here on behalf of the principal sharing some of the fall to winter growth data in a condensed fashion because we'll share more with you in the spring and then again next summer. So The biggest piece of takeaway, I think from our fall to winter data is around the growth that we're seeing in the buildings. Ryan did a nice job of giving you a really good snapshot of what they've seen at Great Lakes. We started the fall with FastBridge as our new assessment software program, K-5. A little bit of the information Ryan shared as well. So we are still learning a little bit about that assessment, and it reports a little bit differently than other assessment tools we have seen. However, we are seeing really solid growth. I would say K-5, our assessments look a little bit different. So what we've used in our AGR reports, the principals chose letter sounds and decodable words at the K1 level, and at the K level, I apologize. And at the first grade, we're using decodable words and sight words as our reading measure. For math, number sequence, number ID for kindergarten, and decomposing numbers and place value at the first grade level. At second and third grade, so our report only goes kindergarten through third grade. At second and third grade, we're using the adaptive reading and the adaptive math assessments as our measures for those. So the principals all have a report that looks like this, many pages that they're submitting to the state. But in a summary to you, we have seen the principals set their goal at 100% of students are going to reach the 40th percentile or demonstrate growth. And we have seen, obviously, we're not to that 100% yet because we are only in January when we pulled the data, but we are seeing growth rates hovering between 80 to 90% from fall to winter. And we're seeing most grade levels in most buildings showing 90 to 99 to 100% of students showing growth. So we're seeing very few students, even if they haven't reached that 40th percentile yet, we're still seeing growth. So we're really wanting to celebrate the growth that we're seeing. And again, as whenever we're talking about nationally normed assessments and looking at a bell curve of a percentile, we're looking using this data at the 40th percentile, which FastBridge research data shows that our students who can reach that 40th percentile have a lower risk by the end of their year, whatever year they're in, according to the research. So that 40th percentile is a solid indicator of that risk level. So we're really working hard, and I think Ryan emphasized that very well, at making sure our kids are reaching that 40th percentile, national percentile. So it is not as compared to kids here, it is compared to a nationally normed assessment, hundreds of thousands of kids in that sample database. And then that's also a comparative measure to state assessments. So they can create some correlation. If we can do well here, we can predict future success on state assessments. So the AGR report, from a statute perspective of sharing with you some brief updates, the principals really are sharing more of that building specific data when they do their building updates, and all of that's contained within their CIP goals at their building level. So again, just a little update from my lens on that. Questions about AGR in general or specific questions? Okay, thank you.
Thank you. Thanks.
Next up is Jen, Director of Childhood and Family Education.
Hi, everyone. My update will be really quick. I always like to tell everybody in February, this is when we start enrollment for early childhood. So 3K and 4K enrollment actually starts tomorrow. And Casey has been working really hard this past month with Aaron Gray to update our early childhood website. So everything should be on there with all the updated information, nice links, easy to find to get to the enrollment page and all that good stuff. So I'm excited about all of that. In addition to that, and this isn't preschool enrollment update, but kindergarten also starts right about the same time. So we are working with our families who are currently enrolled in 4K to kind of roll them into kindergarten and get the families what they need for information. But then new families coming to us who are not currently in 4K, enrollment for kindergarten starts tomorrow as well.
I had somebody ask me, is there a specific time that enrollment starts? Morning.
There isn't, but I always tell everybody by 8 a.m. it's open. Yeah.
All right.
Okay. Any other questions?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Definitely my report.
All right, thank you, Steve. Next up, we got personnel negotiation.
Thank you. I have 4 action items tonight. Administration recommends approval of the February 2023 new hire transfers and separations report.
Move to approve.
Second.
Got a motion and a second. Discussion. Hearing none. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Administration recommends renewal of administrative contracts for 23-24 school year.
Move to approve.
Second.
Motion and a second. Any discussion?
Molly, do you want to just give some context? And do you want to click on that link?
Yep. Yep, so this is something new we're doing this year. As I went to a WASB webinar with an attorney and found out the board needs to be approving the administrator renewals for the next school.
This is the only employee group they need to act on individually?
Correct.
Okay.
Yep, so that's why it is 3.3 meetings now. And then we will still follow the same renewal process that's set in the state statute about notifying the administrator that they're being renewed and giving them an actual contract. That is all has a timeline set forth in the state statute.
And what are the employee groups that require a contract?
Admin, teachers, and then bus drivers. So
all of those will be distributed this spring.
correct, and there's a statute for timelines for each of those groups.
We're within the timeline with the administrative group.
What if, say hypothetically, I know this is not an issue, but like, we weren't sure someone on that list was gonna get a contract renewal, like, how do you?
So, I supervise administrators. Are you looking at Ryan? Are you making? The statute.
That's an app.
Statute requires that we notify administrators prior to January 31st if they're not going to get a contract. Okay, so we would have followed that process. We'd already, I mean, just because if they've notified the administrator, they wouldn't be getting a contract and their name would not show on this list.
Got it.
And what is the timeline they have to inform us? Is that also the
By the end of March.
March?
So they have to respond that they accept it.
And they-
And then once you do salary increase approvals, then we get out the contracts with the rates.
Thank you.
Any other discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Motion passes. Next action item, administration recommends releasing Melissa Hepikoski, elementary teacher, from her 2022-23 school year contract per her request effective February 3rd, 2023, with the liquidated damage provision enforced.
I make a motion to move this action item to Monday, February 13th in closed session.
I second that.
We have a motion and a second for an approval to move discussion to closed session in our next meeting. Any discussion on that motion?
Wait, so that you're amending? No, you're just moving it to,
Yeah.
okay. All right, sorry, it just doesn't say that, so I was like,
Doesn't say what.
to move to closed session in the action item language, but I get what he's saying.
Do we need to,
I just put the language based off of the options in the handbook that we can waive the liquidated damages. And in her resignation letter, she did not meet any of those, which is why it says the liquidated damages provision enforced. I know she wrote you guys a separate letter, so which that if it's individual, we have to discuss it in closed session.
Correct.
Well, the notion is to be able to discuss.
The motion is to move it to closed session, so you.
So that we can't discuss. things that can't be discussed publicly.
And would it,
And do that tonight, you're saying do that next Monday.
Monday, 13th.
so then it will show up on open session again or only closed?
Let's show
Closed.
Go up on both, I believe.
I'd be on both.
The discussion will happen in closed, I'm assuming.
And then you'll add,
We'll vote in public then.
got it. Yeah.
Officially.
Okay.
I'll ask Kyle. He was the one who gave the direction.
Okay.
So did we vote?
Not yet.
Oh.
I'm just waiting to see if there's any more discussion. If there's any more discussion, voting on the new motion, all those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? So the motion is to approve that. We'll discuss that in closed session next week and vote formally then. Anything else we need to do, Mr. President?
Set this one for your last action item.
Excellent. Okay, so last action item, school board considers proposal from a QTI group regarding a compensation study for administrators per the request from the administrator meet and confirm meeting.
Second.
A motion and a second. We also have public comment. So I would say we move to hear public comment during discussion before we vote.
Can I have Molly just create some context first?
Absolutely.
Okay, so we met with the administrator group. This was something they felt was important to be able to hire a third-party company to go on to do a comparability study for their salaries and positions. So I had 3 groups that I looked at. One of them would not pull Minnesota comps, which we know is something we wanted to do in the study with the area that we're in. The second group was a law firm out of Eau Claire, and they were more expensive. So I brought forward this proposal to you. And it talks about their process, about how they would get the detailed description of each job. They will create the survey to give out to the other districts and would have them participate and then put together the results. There is a price difference on here based off of if we want them to come to present the final results of the board meeting, or if I would just present them based off of their report. So that's why there's a cost or a price difference. It is what we want them to do.
The reason we're bringing this to the board is for 2 reasons. One is we want approval to proceed because this came out of meet and confer. Second reason is we don't want to move forward with this study if there's not an intent to address the recommendations as part of the budget challenges that we're facing. So we need some direction from the board about how to proceed if we move forward with the study.
You said that this is something that came out of meet and confirm?
This came at the meet and confirm meeting. And we created an admin work group to kind of talk about next steps, and this was their recommendation.
What other discussion do we have from the board before we open to public comment?
I guess on Amy's comment there on if we did do a study, are we going to act on the study? Or is the study going to be for nothing and $12,000 to $14,000 goes down the drain? And I won't repeat my comments on budget stuff, but I think that meet and confer maybe came out before we dove deep into budget. Again, I would say that that's kind of bad timing for where we're at as a district now. And so I guess me personally, I'd be against spending more money until we figure out what to do with the deficit that we have already.
This is a one-time expense though, right?
Correct. But if the board were to change the salaries, that'd be a recurring expense.
It's a one-time expense, but it's an expense added on top of every other expense that we keep deciding on. And if we're gonna do it, we should listen to a study. And if we're not gonna listen to a study, then I don't know. That's my 2 cents.
The question I got is why don't they want to use the Minnesota schools up here? Because I was reading there, we're all using more southern schools. They are independently more healthy and wealthy than we are. We're behind them a little bit. So it's hard to compare there also. You know, that's one of the concerns I have. Because
We're going with this company because they will look at Minnesota.
Oh, they will look at Minnesota.
Well, the other one wouldn't.
Okay.
But that's why they did a detailed job description for each job because the titles are even different with administrator in Wisconsin versus Minnesota.
Yeah.
I'd like to think that we could come back to this study too, after we figure out our own mess per se. Like the study doesn't have to be right now, the study could be next year or the following year. I mean, I'm just saying we should put it off and wait to see what's going on with our own district.
Has this been done before in our district, say for the other groups or for administration?
We did it 2 or 3 years ago using the Big Rivers Conference group as a comparison.
For admin?
Yep, for all groups.
Yeah.
Is there any, oh, sorry. Is there any way to do this without an outside company? Or is it just a lot?
Well, I do it already with the Big Rivers group every year. All the HR directors, we put all of our data into a spreadsheet. I think the administrator group really wanted a more comprehensive look at that. And again, that's not using any of the Minnesota schools that we're trying to attract admin candidates from. So that'd be the only downfall of just using the Big Rivers.
I mean, the same token, a lot of unions that are going into negotiations, do their own outreach to other unions, see where they're at, see what they're negotiating for. So in the same regard, there's nothing that says we as a district can't call other districts, say, hey, would you mind sharing some information, just like anybody else in the public can ask for stuff. I don't think it takes much to ask. They can say no, but you know.
Well, many times it's also posted on their website.
School salaries, it's all public anyway.
Yeah, and it's public information. So, I mean, the worst thing, we'd have to make an open records request to get the information. But I think it's just the time of putting together all the data and reaching out to all the schools and making sure that we're getting the exact comparable positions that won't be.
I don't want to make, I don't even know if this is gonna sound appropriate, but as administrators, could each person, could they delegate to try to come up with something to present to us? You know, if each administrator takes one school or one area, I mean, I don't know. Too much?
I think so.
Too much.
I think they're.
It shouldn't go that way.
Well, I think the other thing is that it's not always apples to apples, you know, we have a pretty distinct step in lane wage table where it might be very different in another district where you see base wage or wage on the table, but they might get an extra $200 for doing this, that, or some other things. So they're not, that's what this group would dive into.
Sure, okay.
I value all of our employees a lot. I wouldn't feel comfortable as a board member moving forward unless we planned on doing something similar to all of our units. It's not to diminish the importance of our principals or anybody else, but we've really been careful about addressing groups as a whole, and I would hesitate to do it unless we plan to commit to do it for all groups.
We have a couple options there. One is we could do it like one group this year, one group next year. We could do that.
Excellent.
If we did it all in the same time, Molly, do you have an idea of what that cost would be? Because I would imagine that would be a much higher number if we included all the employee groups in this.
Yeah, so remember, this is taking 17 positions, the cost of that. So for support staff would probably be similar. Teacher group would obviously be one, but you probably have to add in a specialist as separate. So
twice as much or more?
For sure, twice as much.
My other hesitation is that I have seen this, and just from my own reading and understanding where other employers have done similar things. I don't know if I've ever seen compensation come in lower than what they're currently making. I've never seen anything be lower. So I concur with the comments that you made in terms of I would like to have the ability to not only pay for the study, but to move forward with anything that was recommended. Or at least have the ability to consider moving forward with any recommendations. I know it's not exactly what you said, but to be able to have that ability, I don't want the information if I can't honor it. And I would anticipate that there's a chance it could come in quite a bit higher than what we would assume when we're looking at the national things that are happening in terms of costs of living and things like that. So
I agree with Mike. It probably should be done for all groups. What that would look like, I guess, year by year or all in one. I mean, I don't think it's gonna get cheaper either to do a project like this. And I mean, also it gives us data for writing our legislators, for saying our district has inequity in funding throughout the state. At the convention, the education convention, they had our district bright red as, you know, inequitable funding compared to a lot of other parts of the state. And these are actual numbers that we should be taking to our governor. We should be taking to our legislators to show them like this is where we should be. And I agree it should be used for more than that, but then let's look at realistic budgeting to at least move that way. We are facing a huge deficit, but that also is going to inform what we end up doing as a district. I think what our salary should be or what we should be striving towards. Just my thoughts about that it would actually maybe be helpful to have that information for budget decisions.
And I just want to echo off of Mike and Laura. I would like to see it done with everybody. Is there any chance you could ask them how much it would cost to do everybody, all the employees? And then we could make a decision from that point forward.
And again, this came forward to you because it came out of meet and confer.
Yep.
So we were acting on.
And I'm struggling because I want to hear the requests of the administrators and honor those things to show our appreciation and gratitude and our support of them. But I do agree that I'm worried that if we do have it, we won't be able to act on it because of the budget shortfall. So I don't know.
It looks pretty bad when you pay for a study and then can't act on it.
Right.
It leaves a bad taste in employees' mouth.
It's a hollow thing.
Right.
It doesn't have any teeth.
No teeth.
I think the writing on the wall is we have budget issues right now. It's going to be, I agree with Mike. I've never seen a study come in lower. I mean, it's just the way they are. So that's going to be hard. It's going to be hard to act on it, and it's just doesn't seem like the right time. Not that I don't want to do it. I'd rather put it off until we see what's going to go on in 23, 24, 24, 25.
And I'd like to continue to be creative with what we've been trying to do. I know as a district, we've been continuing to try to allocate funds equitably wherever we can for employee groups and for student activity and all the other things we're competing priorities we're juggling. So I really appreciate the administrative group recommending it. I think it's a solid recommendation. What I'm hearing is that we have some challenges to that, and there might be some things that change that might allow it, and there's some usefulness to it. Is there any more discussion amongst our board members? I want to invite our public comment if not. I'm not hearing any. Al, would you mind?
Sure.
Thank you.
Just real quick, because it was already mentioned, you know, I know teachers haven't had their meet and confer, but I would guess that probably would have popped up as well. So I appreciate the board asking that it would be like a study on all the positions. So I do think it's great that we are seeing some discussion from things that came out of the meet and confer. So I appreciate that it was moved on, and I think there's been some good discussion. So we appreciate it as well to be included in a study, I guess. So.
Thank you, Kyle. Anything else? Discussion? So then I'll read it again. I should just say those in favor of school board considering proposal for QTI group regarding a compensation study for administrators per the request from the administrator meet and confirm meeting. All those in favor of moving that to next week's agenda, please signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Those opposed?
No.
No. The motion does not pass, and we will not be moving that forward to next week's consideration.
Can I ask a question then? Are we still going to be able to get a cost for the whole group? So can that be a separate thing? Okay.
It might not be back in time for next week. So
Sure.
maybe we move that forward to March.
Sure.
Okay.
Thank you.
And again, the board could consider doing this in stages as opposed to all at once. Okay.
That would be wonderful.
Mr. President, I don't have any other discussion items, no informational items, and I think my report.
Thank you, Mike. Right now, we'll move on to Policies and Rules Committee with Laura.
No action items, no informational items, just one discussion item. District response to public comments about staff, including social media.
So I added this to get some direction from the board. We have had a situation recently, and I'm looking at our teachers across the room. I want our teachers to hear publicly that our administrators support them. When situations arise through public comment or social media where potentially public has not followed district policy around public complaint, and potentially has made comments about staff that are untrue, that really jeopardize careers and lifestyles of our staff. And want a little direction as to the steps that we should be taking as a school district when situations happen. I want to publicly, and I've shared this with SFT prior, when those types of situations happen where comments are made about our staff that are untrue, I want our staff to know that they'll be supported by administration, and we will help and support our staff. So I bring this to the board level because I think it's an important conversation to have at the board level as well. But ultimately, you know, is there a request or a desire at the board level that we pursue legal action when this happens? I'm concerned about recent events that impacted at least one person in particular in the district.
Yeah, we talked about it briefly. When somebody wants to go on social media and not follow the guidelines and say things that we can prove that are not true, and
it doesn't even give us an opportunity to do an investigation.
Correct. But if we know they're not true, we can, I personally would like to talk to our attorney to find out what we could do to that person. I mean, it's not right. It's giving people a free rein to just go out and bash without facts our staff. And I personally wouldn't want to tolerate that. I think people should be held accountable for what they say and what they do on social media. That's me.
In my view of accountability may have a continuum. So I appreciate what you said. When I think about accountability, I think there's a lot of ways that we can hold people in our community accountable. One of them might not be legal. It could be, do we have a policy or a plan to approach the individual if we're able to reach out to them, to ask about their concerns, to measure their grievances and give them an opportunity to engage in a productive and more positive way. I worry about people's rights to speech. And I also worry about the impact that it has on our whole culture and our teachers, students. I don't like students using it from student to student either. So I'm just bringing up that point of, is it perhaps something that if we were able to do that, would it be more productive to have an outreach plan or a policy plan to at least provide that first?
Yeah, that's a good.
As a way to mitigate that conversation and to include the conversation in a more productive way, because it sounds like this is an extremely unproductive conversation to be had about one of our staff members, which I don't support. But I also.
The challenge is when comments are put in social media or are public without going through the proper channels of a proper investigation, the damage is done before the investigation can even be done.
Yeah.
So that's my, and the things you just described were certainly done. The principal reached out right away.
Sorry, I
Yeah.
didn't mean to say it didn't.
Yeah.
Thank you.
But just the concern is not following our district policies around public complaints and not allowing the administrator to really do an investigation in the right way.
So is it worth putting a committee together to look at the policy?
Well, and I looked to see if we have a policy on this. We really don't.
So that's something, can we look at other districts to see if other districts have policies?
I did reach out to Neola and ask if this is something other districts have put together. He pretty much said that really the only recourse that districts take is legal action if that's something that they want to do.
The problem with the district policy, the only people that truly have to follow a district policy are district employees.
Yeah.
It's not the public.
That was his point, right? That was his point. Yeah.
We can write whatever policies we want. They don't have to follow. There's no recourse for it except for potential civil litigation. When you get into civil litigation, I'm sure Kyle would talk about, like Mike said, now you're talking about people's individual rights. And do I condone it? Absolutely not.
What about our staff's rights?
Well, everybody has rights, right? But limiting one person's right, you know, it's a whole different conversation. But going back to policy, people don't have to follow our policy. We have to follow our policy because there's ramifications for us. Civil litigation, getting that, you're gonna fight, you know, people's amendment rights. You're gonna fight that, and you're probably gonna lose it. I think we're throwing money in civil litigation. I don't condone it whatsoever. But it's the reality of the world we live in. People can say and speak what they want. You know,
There is-
limiting the whole bomb on a plane conversation, that type of stuff, but a real fine line on spending money for civil litigation.
I guess I want to be able to answer a teacher's comment. What are we going to do to support our staff? And I was looking for the board to provide some direction around that.
I think the target we need to take is supporting that teacher coming out front. Maybe we need to make a public comment on it. Maybe we need to put that teacher right back in position. And supporting them in the school. You know, I don't have all the answers, but maybe it's just our actions as a district and as a board showing that we support that individual, because we're not going to get it just out in the public.
Do you think the roles of public servants right now across the board are it's very challenging, the amount of public comment that happens. It puts a lot of our public servants in danger. But I also haven't seen anything yet about legally what might happen. So I'm interested to see what Kyle might say in terms of we as the district, if that's something that we would want to pursue, or if it'd be something we support individuals with doing with civil litigation. Or just like you said, working on some support plans, what that might look like. I just don't think there's an easy answer to this.
No, there's not.
Are there any other suggestions that we have?
The only suggestion was to take legal action against slanderers.
I guess that's what, you know, going to Ed's point about like expenses for civil litigation and how much we pay Kyle, like, you know, a cease and assist letter, like there are steps legally that, you know, threat to take further legal action, defamation, like there are steps we could ask Kyle to put together, and like what approximately would those types of expenses look like? Because in this situation, it just sounds absolutely horrendous. And, you know, going through public scrutiny myself, and worried about threats and things that people make, your workplace should be a safe place. And we can't control, I agree, amendment rights are always going to trump, but there is statutes specifically for these types of situations, civilly, that you can seek remedies and threaten action, at least to stop people or ask them to remove comments like that. There are ways to do that, including just going through that social media company as well.
I certainly can ask Kyle to put together what he would recommend as next steps for the specific situation.
Yeah,
Please.
have Kyle weigh in, give a recommendation.
I will share that with the board when I get it.
It does, President, apologize.
Right, next we got the Budget and Insurance Committee with Brooke.
All right, I have one action item tonight. Gifts, grants, and bequests. Administration recommends approval to accept gifts, grants, and bequests received in the past month.
Move to approve.
Second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Thank you.
This is crazy. We have so many listed every time. And I know we always say thank you, but really appreciate the support we have for these things.
Some of those grants down there, are they employees writing grants to get that money, or are they outside people?
Food service grant is just a grant that was awarded to us and that was written. Project Joy, I'm not quite sure. And Jamie, I don't know if it's not food service one that was written, or is that was just donated?
I wrote that.
Good job on writing for a grant.
Foundation.
Someone up in middle school probably wrote it.
Probably. Be my guess.
I think Kids Plus is a youth initiative, so like it would have been like a student that had an idea for a project and they'd partner with the teacher to write it.
Aaron says, yep.
I was part of it. So, yeah.
Yeah. Is there any further discussion? Hearing none, all those in favor, please signify by saying aye. Aye. All opposed? All right, motion carries. I have one discussion item, second Friday in January 2023 pupil count.
You know, as by statute we're required to do our counts September, January. Unfortunately, we are down again in January compared to September, about 58 students. It's something that we anticipated this was going to happen, so this isn't surprising. In terms of a funding mechanism, this is what they'll use to true up any of our aid that's left to pay throughout the year. Aid and then enrollment notifications, they true up all of that. That numbers can.
Did we account for some of the 58? Did they move away or is it just a truancy thing?
No idea. I can say that you know, we gained 4 preschool special education. We lost 2 and 4K. Last 60 in grades 1 through 12. That's the extent of the information.
It's really, when I glanced at it, it's really sprinkled across the grade levels.
This is something Casey has, right?
Yes, Casey puts this together for us. She is gone this week, so if we can ask her for next Monday if there's any. I did ask her if there's any specific trends that we can report out. So I'll ask her.
Sure. I don't believe there are any specific noticeable trends, movement in how.
Yeah, reasons why, patterns. Yeah.
Because we get, like, we would transfer, we know somewhat if they transfer their.
Yeah, we'll get a records request.
Right.
From school.
Okay.
We don't just drop students who don't.
Yep.
There's a law in the state of Wisconsin and like Minnesota, we can't just drop kids who don't attend. So we have records on all of our kids.
Okay.
Well, at the end of their semester of their 18th birthday, correct?
Until they're 18.
Yeah.
But the end of that semester.
And in Minnesota, they drop them after 15 days of not being in school.
Correct.
Wow.
Thanks for answering my question. That's a question. I had.
Then I have one informational item, Fund 10 revenue and expense update.
We're in that kind of a lull time of year here in February, in March. The breaks on spending in order to year end. In terms of revenue, like I said, we're in a lull, but this is kind of this is what they use that third party account to determine some of those payments. A couple of things just to point out. Budgeted 45,000 for retail ticket sales, and right now we're currently coming in at about 72,000. So that's good, about 27,000 more than we have budgeted. We'll start seeing those payments from the state aid now that we've done the January count. And that AGR, it's listed as staged on here with those allocations that were just sent out last week. We'll start to see those payments now come through. Or to the expenses. Again, we're in this fall. We'll start monitoring this probably middle to end of March, and then those spending that's on in April, and then start reviewing through year end. But there's nothing that's standing out as out of the ordinary or that we need to review in terms of going severely over budget.
All right. That concludes my report, Mr. President.
All right. And last up, legislative committee with Ed.
All right, there's no action item, no discussion items. We got 2 informational items, both come from the WASB legislative update section. That you can check out by clicking the links. The first one, WPF, state and local tax burn, lowest on record. From the Wisconsin Policy Forum, driven down by 1 billion income tax cut and tight limits on property taxes. Wisconsin state and local tax burden fell in 2022 to its lowest level on record. Local taxes as a share of income have never been lower in more than a half century of data, and state and federal taxes on families and businesses are also near historic lows. The second one, Governor Evers' state of the state speech highlights funding for mental health initiatives. State of the state address as Governor Tony Evers outlined
proposals to spend nearly 1.3 billion on mental health initiatives addressing PFAS and bolstering the state's workforce, among other things. The Evers also called for a big boost in state aid to local governments and schools. Each Evers noted that the record state budget surplus, as well as the record balance in the state's stabilization rainy day fund. You can click the link to see that. How it affects us, I have no idea. That concludes my,
Thank you, Ed. I didn't see any cards. You don't have any other comment cards. All right, so there are no comments by the public. With that, meeting is adjourned. Thank you, everyone. And it's somebody.